where are we at with where are we at right now with this situation in Ukraine?
Yeah,
we
we
were
haven't even
looking
gotten
at
to
like a
that.
winter offensive, and
Well,
it's kind of the stories over there again. Not front and center, at least here where I'm at anyway. I'm not seeing as much media attention. It's hard to keep track.
Gee, I wonder why they're not talking about it all of a sudden, Scott.
well, they're not talking about it because it's over, and they know it's over. I mean, all you got to do is listen to Jan Stoltenberg stutter his way through his speech yesterday, where he said what I've been saying all along. In September, I just want to remind people, in September, I said that the Ukrainians just burned through their entire reserve force. They got nothing left, and they're out of ammunition. They don't have enough ammo, and when you don't have ammo, you die.
Apparently, we're running out of ammunition to send them too.
Well, that's what I meant. I mean, so Stoltenberg sitting there, finally, the military accountant came up to him and said, "We're done." And the Ukrainians showed up in Ramstein for I think the 10th meeting of the Ukrainian contact group, and they thought they were going to come in there and say, "We need jet airplanes and we need more tanks, and you guys are going to give it to us because politically we're on the high thing." And Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley had to go time out. Now that ain't the narrative we're talking about anymore, because we got some hard truths. We're out of ammunition. We got nothing left to give you, and you're going to run out of ammunition this summer, and we can't change that outcome, and you're going to lose the war. And that's straight up what they told them. Straight up, you're going to lose the war, because without ammunition, you can't win the war, and we literally can't turn this around.
Meanwhile, Russia doesn't seem to have any shortage of ammo.
No, or artillery pieces or anything. Russia just completed this big, massive mobilization, and they're getting ready to bring it to engage. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, already burned through their reserves.
They're conscripting anyone with a pulse at this point, aren't they?
They have no choice. They have other people getting trained, but on what? On 14 Challenger 2 tanks. They'll be gone in a week. 14 German Leopard 2 A7s. They're gone in a week. There's just not enough to bring this about. The Russians have everything. The Ukrainians have nothing. This is an artillery war. The head of the U.S. Forces in Europe, who's also the Supreme Allied Commander, General Cavoli, I think his name is, spoke in Sweden last month. And he said the following. He said, what's going on in Ukraine right now is on a scope and scale that was beyond our imagination. We're not prepared for this fight, meaning we being NATO. NATO can't fight this fight. NATO can't win this fight. And he said, this is about artillery ammunition. This is about big guns. We weren't prepared for this. We never thought we were going to be doing this. What the Russians are doing is something that we can't handle. The Russians have all this ammunition. They're firing 20,000 rounds a day, evened out. Some days it's up to 60,000. Some days it's down to 8,000. But on average, 20,000 rounds a day. He said, we don't have the ammunition. We can't do it. There were 1 million rounds. The United States had 1 million rounds in reserve. 1 million. Ukraine is firing, I think, 110,000 rounds every 10 days. So in a month, they fire 330,000 rounds. In 3 months, they exhaust our 1 million round reserves. We can produce 100,000 rounds in a month. They're expending 110,000 rounds in 10 days. So they are burning through ammunition 3 times quicker than we can replace it. We run out of all our ammunition options this summer, where we have nothing. There's nothing to give the Ukrainians. They have nothing. And with no ammunition in a war like this, you will die and lose the war. This is what's going to happen in this conflict. Russia is going to win decisively this summer, because Ukraine will run out of everything, including manpower, by the way.
Here's what I don't understand, Scott. The math seemed pretty obvious from the start of this whole conflict. So why didn't NATO and the United States do that math before entering the conflict?
I think there was, first of all, I think everybody thought that Russia was going to invade Ukraine doctrinally. I mean, Mark Milley briefed Congress that 72 hours, this thing's over. The director of the CIA told Biden 1 week, it's all over. And had Russia come in doctrinally, it would have been all over. But Russia didn't.
Right.
Russia wasn't looking to militarily defeat Ukraine. Russia was looking to get Ukraine to the negotiating table to come up with the solution that Russia had been trying to get the West to buy into before they invaded. You know, the Minsk Accords, the draft treaties they delivered to NATO and the United States on December 17th of 2021. The West turned their back on them, betrayed Russia. So what Russia did is move in, but they called it a special military operation for a reason. It wasn't war. It was something other than war, designed to get Ukraine to the table, and it worked. Ukraine had 3 negotiations in early March, led to the 4th and final negotiation, 1 April in Istanbul, Turkey, where there would have been a peace treaty signed, except Boris Johnson, at the behest of the United States, flew in and canceled it. Russia's been looking for a negotiated settlement from the very beginning. Russia's the only person looking for a negotiated settlement, but they were betrayed. And then NATO turned around and pumped in tens of billions of dollars of equipment to rejuvenate a fundamentally defeated Ukrainian military, which then went on in the offensive in September. And everybody remembers that. Kharkov recaptured, the right bank of Kherson recaptured, Ukrainians saying their Tarzan yell. But what nobody picked up on was they all died. But yeah, they took that territory, but the Russians didn't lose hardly anybody. They sort of withdrew, consolidated defensive line. The Ukrainians went in and got slaughtered by Russian artillery. That big vaunted reserve force they had all died. All the tanks that they were given, hundreds if not thousands of tanks from Poland and elsewhere, all destroyed, and they got nothing left. And NATO's going, whoops, that was sort of it, guys. That was the big push. You needed to win, and you didn't. And now what you did is you pissed off the Russians, because the
You
Russians
don't want to do that.
the Russians. There's that old saying,
History
the
teaches
Russians are slow to harness but fast to ride. Thanks to what we did, Russia mobilized 300,000 reservists, another 200,000 volunteers, 500,000 in total, joining 200,000 already in the field for 700,000. You have the Belarus military, that's a couple 100,000 up there. And the Ukrainians had their 700,000 man military squandered down to 200,000, a little over 200,000 today. Do people understand that in less than a year, Ukraine has suffered more deaths than the United States suffered in all of World War II? In all of World War II, defeating Imperial Japan, working with the Russians and others to defeat Nazi Germany, the United States suffered around 300,000 dead. Ukraine has suffered around 350,000 dead so far.
They've lost a generation.
And then the wounded are there. They've suffered all these, and they've got nothing left. And the Russians, meanwhile, are getting ready to come in like Genghis Khan. And I mean, on the one hand, I don't feel sorry for the Nazis. I hope they all die, and I hope their deaths are painful, and I hope they're soon. Because you have to eradicate them in a way that makes anybody who thinks they want to be a Nazi realize they don't want to be a Nazi.
Which leads me to my next question. I know we're over time, so I'll make this my last. But now that Russia's committed, and they are committed, and they're going to be sending in hundreds of thousands more and moving westward, I know it was not Putin's goal when he started this thing to take the entirety of Ukraine. He wanted to protect the independent republics in eastern Ukraine. But the stated goal of this whole special military operation, part of that goal was to de-Nazify Ukraine. And historically speaking, at least for 100 years or longer, the Nazis have always been in the western part of Ukraine. And so how can you really be sure that you have neutralized the threat once and for all without taking Western Ukraine? Do you think that that will be ultimately, once the Russians come in full bore, that they won't stop until they have basically taken the entire country?
There's a lot of well-placed Russian officials, civilian and military, who have said that this won't end until Russian eyeballs are on the Ukrainian-Polish border staring the Poles in the face. And I understand the emotions behind that statement, but 700,000 troops isn't enough to take Ukraine. It's a huge country. It's enough to do what the Russians need to do to destroy the Ukrainian military. It's enough to take Kharkiv. It's enough to, or Kharkov if you're Russian. It's enough to take Odessa and link up with Transnistria. It's enough to liberate the 4 recently acquired territories, all their territory, plus push 150 kilometers inward, thanks to the United States. The Russians were only going to go 80, but because we provided the Ukrainians with longer range systems, the Russians have said, you will never again be allowed to hit Russian territory. So they're going to go 150 kilometers in and destroy the Ukrainian military. They have sufficient forces to do that, but to cross over the Dnieper River and then drive into Western, that's a lot of territory. They don't have enough troops to do that. At least I don't believe. I mean, again, who knows what arrows are being drawn on Russian maps? Who knows? From a military perspective, I don't see them being able to do that, even with the large force they have in Belarus. I think the Belarusian force is more of a force of deterrence to keep Poland out of Western Ukraine and to pin the Ukrainians down in Kiev. But who knows? On February 21st, Putin's given a speech. And I think he's going to make some things pretty clear. Some people are talking about there might be a union, that the Belarus will come back into the Russian Federation. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it does, suddenly those Belarusian troops become Russian troops, and that changes the political equation, and those troops can now be engaged. Right now, Lukashenko has made it clear that he doesn't want Belarus forces in Ukraine. And Putin has respected that so far, but who knows once the union legalities change what Russia will do. But I think Russia's not looking to occupy the entire country. That's a difficult task, and it leads to a never-ending conflict. I think Russia wants this war over, and the way you do that is to destroy the Ukrainian military, which I believe they'll be able to do by the end of summer, early fall of this year. And then you have to denazify. And the way you denazify, at least in Scott Ritter's world, is what they appear to be doing. They took, General the General Armageddon, who stabilized the front, and then the Russians then restructured the general staff to reflect the reality that this is a massive offensive they're getting to run on several fronts. And Surovikin was given control of the air campaign, which means the air campaign is now a standalone campaign to do what? To destroy Ukraine as a modern nation state, to knock out its electrical grid, to take out its infrastructure, to collapse it as a society. Why? Why would you go that route? Because when you collapse Ukraine as a society, Zelensky becomes politically unviable. And the idea is to bring down the Zelensky regime internally, have the Ukrainians take care of this problem, and then to replace Zelensky with somebody who will accept the Russian terms of surrender. And one of those terms will be, of course, a new constitution that outlaws banderism, makes Stepan Bandera the name that you cannot say.
Now you're talking.
Blow up the monuments, outlaw the political parties,
yes,
etc. This has to be a Ukrainian solution, not a Russian solution. Ukraine has to do this, but in order to do that, you have to bring down Zelensky. And when you collapse society to the point that Zelensky's out, society is going to turn on those who made this war possible, and that is the Banderists. That is Bandera supporters. That is the Sloboda Party. That is the right sector. That is.
And they've been the cancer in Ukraine for 100 years, these Ukrainian nationalists. Surely not all of the Ukrainian people are on board with what they do. They've been nothing but trouble.
Nothing but trouble. But again, I'm not saying that approach will ultimately succeed. I mean, the problem with ideology is how do you stamp out ideology?
Right.
And it's been there for a while in Western Ukraine. It's literally, that is poison territory.
They were Nazis before there was a Nazi party in Germany. When you trace this back to World War I, those guys were already there and already had their Nazi beliefs before Nazi was even a word. Before there was
people. Bad people. So,
right.
Petlura days, I think they call them. This is the original founder of this movement of Ukrainian nationalism.
Right. Long before anyone ever heard of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, they were doing this stuff. They were the white supremacists.
Pogroms.
They were the ultranationalists. They murdered people.
Yes, sir.
So it's a Ukrainian solution. I can't guarantee that outcome. I don't think anybody can. It's a political problem that requires a long-term approach. But I think what Russia will say is that they at least will get Ukraine on the path towards denazification. And that has to be done without a Russian occupation. That has to be a Ukrainian solution. And that's going to take time. See, I think Russia is going to demilitarize Ukraine sometime in the August, October timeframe of this year. And I think that will also bring about probably a change in the government in Kiev. But the political solution is going to be longer because Russia, if Russia dictates a solution to Ukraine at the point of a gun, the
That's
West
never
isn't
gonna
going to
work.
accept it. So
Right.
what Russia is going to have to do is find a way to get the West to work with Russia to create a post-conflict Ukrainian government that
Mm.
isn't going to be, A, isn't going to be a cancer to Russia, but B, isn't going to be this economic black hole for Europe. So
You
it's
mean
going
like
to
we
be
were supposed to do after World War II? Wasn't that what the United Nations in
yeah,
Nuremberg was supposed to be all
supposed
about?
to do.
And then somehow those Nazis just kind of got away and they immigrated to Canada and they came to the United States and they went to South America. And I think we only prosecuted what 22 at Nuremberg.
Not enough.
Yeah, not enough.
Not
And
enough.
Stalin did his best to hunt them down and try to get the last of them. But yeah, denazification is a bitch. Let
It's
me
going to
tell
be
you.
it's
We
going to
wouldn't
be
be
a
here
problem.
today talking about fascism in the 21st
Yeah.
century had we done it correctly back in 1945, 46, 47. But instead, Winston Churchill decides he wants to do Operation Unthinkable
Yeah.
and he wants to stab his ally in the back, right, and invade the Soviet Union. And then he used, and the CIA here in the United States, starting around 1947, the very beginning of the agency, started cozying up to these Ukrainian nationalists, started cozying up to Stefan Bandera, who had a CIA code name.
Yep.
Nikola Lebed also had a CIA code name. Alan Dulles personally recruited Lebed, brought him to the United States, set him up in New York City, where he lived a long, happy life, despite the fact that he had a murder conviction as a war criminal. And the CIA protected him. We protected a lot of them. And that's how we got here today, because they were all useful during the Cold War, doing guerrilla warfare against the Soviet Union when we were trying to destroy it and do regime change. And we're just repurposing that same old plan as
And
far
the
as,
thing, the interesting thing is the CIA was assisted by an organization called the Gehlen Organization,
Yes, sir.
which is a Nazi intelligence officer who operated the intelligence organization on the East Front against the Soviets and had a huge network of stay behind assets, many of whom were Banderas, Stepan Bandera's people. And so Gehlen, a Nazi who should have been prosecuted for war crimes and killed, instead became the head of the German intelligence service, working for the CIA, et cetera. And so people ask, why is Germany doing this? Because it was never cleansed. Germany was never cleansed. And I get in a lot of trouble when I say this, but scratch a German, you get a Nazi.
You're absolutely right. I mean, all you have to do is study some history, and it's so obvious, so clear.
So in order to get rid of that, I mean, when you talk about the problem of denazification in Ukraine, understand, we have the problem of incomplete denazification in Germany, where many people were allowed to become mainstream in the post-war economy, in the post-war politics, the post-war, military. There's a lot of German officers there in the 1950s who were, supporters of the Nazi regime in the 1940s.
Absolutely. They went on to occupy positions in government and
everywhere.
everywhere.
You had a couple of outliers like Willy Brandt,
Yeah.
who did the right thing. In 1972, he went to Warsaw, fell on his knees, begging forgiveness for the crimes that were committed. But a lot of Germans weren't happy about that. They weren't happy that he, showed resentment for this. And today we have literally, the nexus of German nationalism, industrialism, and militarism coming together once again to send German tanks that are named after cats over to Berlin to kill Russians. I mean, did we not remember what happened to the Panther? What happened to the Tiger? Why are we sending leopards? This is just stupid.
I
Can
just
I ask
felt.
you-
Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
Yeah. here in Canada, we have a history of, I guess, hiding Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And I see signs of fascism becoming prominent again, especially over the last month.
Fashionable, even.
Yes. So I'm hoping that maybe, Scott, you can help our viewers, especially here in Canada, by telling them how we might recognize the warning signs. People have a cliched image of what a Nazi is. It's like it's people who kill Jewish people, but it's more complicated than that. And so I'm can I just throw it to you to explain in your own way what you think people should be looking for when we're trying to identify the danger, the threat of fascism emerging in our society? And I hope I'm not putting you on the spot too much, but I guess I'm really asking you for a definition of fascism. But more than that, what are the warning signs? Because personally, I think I'm seeing it, and it's more complicated than a Steven Spielberg cliche Nazi who just is an evil dude in a black suit.
Doesn't have to have a little mustache.
Right.
No. I mean,
real and German.
a key element of fascism is, of course, it's the nexus of industry and government wrapped in nationalism. It may not have overt racism, but there's a racial aspect to a sort of a purity test. And Canada, unfortunately, which its history is, what Canada did to the First Nation. The history of abuse of the first, I don't know, is it First Nation, First People?
First Nations.
First Nation, yeah. In the United States, we of course don't even give them that honor. They're just Indians. But the abuse that occurred there. So Canada is already prone to, whether they recognize it or not, it's a racist society. The Canadians will say, we're not racist. Well, you are. You are. You treated the First Nations very badly, and you continue to do so. And then what happens is you allow infiltration. And one of the great infiltrations that taken place in Canada and Canadian history is what happened after World War II, with the Western Ukrainians fleeing and being brought into Canada and allowing to establish themselves as communities without question. I have no problem with people coming into a country and being integrated, but integration means that they sort of drop the prejudices that they enter into, and they buy into what you're supposed to be. In America, that's what's supposed to happen. It doesn't happen, but it's supposed to happen. But in Canada, you allow these communities that are hate-filled with horrific records. I mean, we're talking about people, mass murderers, slaughtering Jews, slaughtering Poles, slaughtering Russians, coming in and allowing to establish themselves intact and continue the practices. I mean, this is where somebody like Krista Freeland.
Krista Freeland.
You have to look at her. Not only is her grandfather a documented Nazi supporter who came over here and everybody knew who he was, but they pretended he wasn't. They pretended he was this upstanding citizen. He's not an upstanding citizen. He's a Nazi supporter. She, entered this youth movement. I can't remember the exact name of it.
Yeah, it's like the Canada Banderite Youth organization.
But the whole thing is they worship Bandera. They worship Stefan Bandera. They sing his praises.
They have summer camps.
She the way they disguise, they say that we study Ukrainian language and we study Ukrainian history and culture. When we try to get an appreciation for history and culture. Really? No, I think you study the writings of Stepan Bandera and you indoctrinate the kids into it. They carry his photograph around in torchlight parades where you wear uniforms that are literally the direct descendant of the brown shirts worn by the SD and the SA during the development of Nazi Germany. And society ignores this. Society ignores this. Canadian society ignores this. So Canada is a nation that, has people who believe that they're free, but you can't be free in a society that condones this kind of hatred. And then as Canada becomes stressed, you see the government behaving in ways that are very anti-democratic, that pretty much fall in line with Bandera thinking. So if you allow Banderas to promote Banderism and then integrate themselves into your government, don't be surprised when stressed, your government falls back on the default, which is Bandera ideology. It's the same thing in the United States when we talk about racism. They keep saying Jim Crow's dead. Jim Crow ain't dead. Jim Crow will never die as long as we have white supremacists who are brought into government, and then when they get stressed, they behave in a way. They don't call it Jim Crow, but they fall back on prior patterns of behavior, which are derived from Jim Crow, derived from segregation, derived from racism. So Canada's got a Nazi problem. America's got a racism problem. And that's just
a Nazi problem.
Yeah,
In my opinion, we have a fascist government right now. I think Joe
Yeah.
Biden's a fascist.
Well,
He's certainly no leftist, I'll tell you that.
No, there's no such thing as a leftist president. They wouldn't get elected if they were a leftist president. They
That's
can
right.
fake you out like Barack Obama, but it wasn't nothing lefty about Barack. He was old school, classic American establishment figure. I mean, anyways, I don't want to get into it.
Well, he continued all of Bush's policies practically without exception. So I don't really see any difference between him and George
But he
Bush.
got a Nobel Peace Prize.
But he got the Nobel
He
Peace
did do
Prize
that, yeah.
while bombing the
did.
hell out of everybody.
Well, even before though, he just got it for being.
Yeah, just
That's
being.
right.
Just being. Hey, that worked.
Funny how the ones who deserve a Nobel Peace Prize never seem to get one. How many
They
years
never
have they been nominating Julian Assange for that?
I hope he gets
10
out of
years.
prison soon, and I hope he's able to
Prayers
get
for
back on his
Julian.
feet and maybe get the recognition he deserves, because he does deserve recognition.
And he deserves freedom.
Yeah, we all deserve freedom, but he especially deserves. What they're doing to him is just a damn shame. I mean,
Well, and it set the precedent, Scott, for all of us who are journalists that criticize the establishment, who are not stenographers, who, question everything that we're told, research, dig deep, and report to the public what we see, honestly, is going on. It normalized prosecution of journalists who are anti-imperialist.
Well,
And there's
it has
jail
a
cell
chilling
waiting for
effect, too.
Rick and for me and everybody right there with Julian.
It's a chilling effect, because what happens is young journalists come in and say, I'd like to be a Cy Hirsch, but I don't want to go to jail.
Right.
And so they become a Judith Miller instead.
And I mean, Cy is 85 years old, and I'm worried for his physical safety right now. I'm worried that they might try to prosecute him or his source.
They won't prosecute Cy.
Surely they
because-
won't come after Cy, for goodness
and
sake.
and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he's a smart man, but if anybody
So's
touches
Julian.
the hair, if anybody touches
eventually
the hair
caught
on Cy's head, that'll be no. I won't put up with that. He's not just a
Absolutely
friend,
not.
but he's the national treasure. He's a national legend.
Yeah, I'm afraid that would set off a hell of a firestorm if they tried to prosecute Cy for his work.
He can't. He knows.
I wouldn't put it past him, though.
He knows too much. No, he's careful. He's careful.
He knows too much.
He's careful. They see. I mean, again, guys like James Risen. Why did Risen get picked on? Because he ain't a good journalist. If he was a good journalist, they would have never been able to find his source.
Exactly.
James Risen sucks as a journalist. Why did Judith Miller get singled out? Because she sucks as a journalist. Because when she writes things, she couldn't hide who her source
It was
was.
sloppy.
You can't prosecute Cy Hirsch because you don't know who his source is, and you will never know who his source is. When the day comes, and I hope it's many, many years from now, when Cy passes on to the great, news agency in the sky, you're never going to know who his sources were because he's that damn good. So you're not going to be able to prosecute Cy, because in order to prosecute, you got to have a hook, and they don't have a hook. They
They ain't
nothing.
got nothing.
They ain't got nothing.
Ain't got nothing. Well, Scott, you've been so generous with your time. Once again, thank you for coming in with us tonight. It's always such a joy to have you. I could just talk to you all night long, but I know you probably got things to do. And Maverick, is Maverick going to make an appearance on Maverick News? You got him locked out of the room right now. You got to see Maverick. I mean,
I think my wife took him upstairs to try and keep him from barking and disrupting. We had a major incident under on Judge Napolitano's show.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, Maverick went berserk, and and there was a lot of hate mail. So out of respect for the judge, we are doing our best to prevent another Maverick meltdown. So
Maverick the dog, he is cute though. I know y'all have probably seen him before.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm grateful for you having the trust in us to share your personal story tonight too. That's a difficult thing to go through, and I think it's obviously difficult to share that publicly.
Well, it was, but not anymore. I mean, because I finally figured out that that's what they want. They want you to feel shame.
Yes.
And they want you to run away from the titles and to avoid. And my whole thing is, one, I don't have anything to be ashamed of. I mean, not criminally. I mean, everybody's got something to be ashamed of. But I got nothing to be ashamed of on that. I'm not going to run away from the title. I'm not going to avoid. You guys want to do it? Let's do it. Because I got nothing to hide. Literally nothing to hide. The entire case is out there. The court records are out there. I am sitting on a whole bunch of stuff that puts it all into perspective. So I'm better armed. If any journalist wants to play gotcha on that, I do have my 5 questions I will ask them in public. And when they can't ask them, I'll tell them to get the F out of my face, because you're not a journalist confronting me with a story you haven't even done the basic research on. Get the F out of here. That's my attitude right now. If you're responsible and you want to have a responsible discussion, you have a legitimate concern, as you guys did tonight, let's have that conversation. And I won't get defensive. I'll be honest. I'll talk about anything you want to talk about. But if you're trying to hurt me and hurt my family, and that's all they're trying to do. They're trying to play a game of gotcha. You can't get me, guys. There's nothing. I'm hiding nothing. There's no gotcha here. Scott, what about that? There ain't no what about that. It's all there. It's all there. So why run? Why hide? That's what they want you to do. They want you to disappear. They want me to go away.
That's right.
I ain't going nowhere. So, call me all the names you want. Water off a duck's back. You can't hurt me. You can't hurt my family. You've tried. We're tired of playing that game. We're moving forward.
And you've got so much support too. If anything, maybe the last month has shown you how many people really do love you and support you out there.
That's one of the great forward with this this plan for 2024, June 2024. We'll certainly do everything we can up here to help you get the message out and get Canada on side 2.
That we need Canada. We need
Boy,
everybody.
do we need Canada.
We need everybody. So no, thank you for that. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on here. It's because of shows like this that I feel empowered to confront this head on, because it's a tough thing. And if you don't have a base, if you don't have a foundation of support, if you don't have the ability to take the blow and fall back and absorb the blow, it's daunting to try and fight something of this scope and scale. So there is a tendency just to say, shh, we're just going to let sleeping dogs lie, and I'll just try and earn a living this way. One of the great things that happened because of this Russian invasion is I became a name. I didn't want to become a name. Trust me, the last thing I wanted to do is become a name, but I became a name. I didn't want to speak at that rally, but I said I would, but I knew what was going to happen. And I'm sort of grateful it happened. In many ways, I guess I should thank Scott Horton and the Libertarian Party, because what you did is you don't get to play that card anymore. I'm not playing your game. You put it all out there thinking that I was going to be embarrassed and I was going to walk away and I was going to hide, and I'm not. So thank you, Scott Horton. Thank you, Libertarian Party. I appreciate it, because Now I just don't care. I don't care what you call me because it's not true. And there's enough people out there right now, because I'm not running away from it, who are saying it ain't true. And at some point in time, it's going to reach critical mass where sufficient number of people say it ain't true. It's no longer a weapon. A weapon doesn't work unless it cuts.
Well,
ain't
what
cutting.
really made me mad as a libertarian of many, many years is the Libertarian Party is not the party where it's not our business to be the speech police or
Yeah.
even the morality police.
Morality police,
I
nothing.
mean,
No.
we are the party that ran John McAfee as a presidential candidate in 2016. Okay. We're usually not big. We're the party that wants to legalize all drugs and prostitution. So we are definitely not in the business of policing morality. But all of a sudden, we make an exception for you, Scott. And that just didn't make any sense to me. And it angered me. I know you. I know the case. I've studied it. I know that the whole thing was a bunch of hooey, that they're doing this again to try and delegitimize you and what
Yeah.
you're saying and distract from your message. So I think it's really big of you that you didn't sue the Libertarian Party. I understand that the stopping this war is more important. You're right. And I think it's very big of you that you still support the rally, even after all that they did to you personally. And thank you for coming on Sunday. And you're doing the right thing. And I salute you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, thank Rick and thank Lori for having me on. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys. And hopefully we can do it again sometime. Maybe not for 3 hours and 50 minutes, but.
Did we do that again?
Well, no, I think you guys did an hour first. So
yeah,
that's
I was on for an hour beforehand.
Only 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Yeah. No, the privilege is ours. Thank you.
It is.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. And have a great night. And
You too.
see you around.
Okay,
See
sir.
ya. Bye, Scott.
Bye.
Okay. I got to get my cursor to work. There we go. Have a good night.
Okay, see ya. That was awesome.
Woo! Isn't he something?
He is.
Just
Yeah.
love the man.